excited to share my journey through the LSAT with everyone today. I initially started my LSAT journey a few years ago, a bit on and off, but I've been studying for a little bit over a year. When I took the LSAT initially, a few times on record, I kept scoring the 150s, and I felt frustrated that I just could not break into my goal of breaking 160 for almost 5 months. And I thought, and now I'm hoping to break 170 this upcoming test, which I honestly thought I would never say at the beginning of this journey. So I thought sharing with you all my journey and how I got there could somehow inspire or help anyone else going through this process. I want to share you my main breakthroughs that helped me achieve 160s and beyond. I'm going to share with you my biggest mistakes from each section and lessons I learned moving forward that I think would be helpful for anyone else in the same situation. And if I could go back in time and tell myself these overall types of issues I ran into and these takeaways, I think I could have reached my goals a lot faster. So the first section in logic games has always been kind of my best section because I have somewhat of a math background, but even then I had some larger issues that prevented me from achieving my full potential. One of my most significant mistakes I made at the beginning was and this all has to do with in a test taking situation, was drawing out rules immediately and then going into the questions without really taking time to diagram. And I came to learn over time that taking the time to diagram and making inferences in your initial diagram will help you quickly answer questions later on. Another lesson that I learned throughout my process was to start doing not being afraid to do the questions out of order. Particularly from local to global questions. I know Steve and some of the other instructors have brought this up, but to me, this means answering all the questions that start with if first, and then moving on to questions that start with which. And essentially the local questions will create new diagrams. For me, that will help me answer global questions more quickly later. Logical reasoning section is probably the section I improved the most on throughout my journey so far. One of my biggest mistakes in logical reasoning was not actively engaging with the stimulus as I read it. By this, I mean I would identify the conclusion through indicator words, and then I move on to the question stem without really thinking much else of the time between the evidence and the conclusion. Before, I was just reading words on a page in a similar fashion I would do for school, which was kind of artificially learning the information to reiterate it later, which is the type of reading strategy I came to learn would not be useful for the LSAT. One way I improved this issue was through visualizing the stimulus as a mental picture or movie in my head as I read it. By this, I mean I literally created an image in my head of what I was reading on the page and using my imagination. Like if the argument was about boats on an ocean, I'm literally picturing boats on an ocean. This is a personal preference because I'm more of a visual learner, so that helped for me. Next, a huge breakthrough I had was breaking this argument down little by little. If I did not understand the first sentence of an argument, I would not move on to the second sentence. If necessary, I would rephrase the argument in my own words. That helps keep the same ideas in a manner I can understand better. And third point, as a personal preference, I like to read the stimulus first and then go to the question stem. I know a lot of other people do it the opposite way, but this is just my own view. So I'm more engaged with the argument actively and don't go in with a biased point of view of a certain question type. In most questions, this is also a personal preference, most questions will have an argument with a gap in them. So I approach all questions kind of like a method of reasoning or flaw reasoning questions. And by this, I mean, I'll actively think in my head what the author assumes or what the author overlooks, that almost like a flaw point of view for all the argument types. And I could always make a different presentation how I do that another time. And so lastly, for reading comprehension, reading comp had always been my worst section. I would say it's just something that I had to improve just with practice over time. It's no doubt the most difficult section, and I honestly think it's one of the most personal sections on the LSAT. By personal, I mean, I think that the variance in the way that high level test takers approach reading comprehension is larger than any other section. I think my biggest mistake at first was worrying about finishing all the passages. And this approach made me not engage with the passage and not double check my answer choices with information. At first, to fix this problem, I slowed down to read for structure and the main point. The way I now approach reading comprehension is having the mindset of why did the author write this and how did he or she go about writing this, which is my way of saying what's the main point in structure. Of course, there are other features to the passage you need to know, such as tone and viewpoints. But for me, just thinking about why it was written and how it came to that point covers everything that I need in the time. And now I don't focus on the details. After reading a paragraph, I also like to pause and think about what I just read and anticipate where the passage is going. This kind of increases my level of engagement with the passage. And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong about where it's going next, but the anticipation is forcing an engagement that helps in my understanding. And something that kind of helped more with my review was knowing that every answer choice will have some sort of support directly in the passage, and to not choose an answer until you can point where in the passage that support comes from. This really changed the way that I reviewed incorrect and correct questions. And then also this is something that I learned from Steve, was to not be afraid to skip questions that are difficult and also do them out of order through the, I think it's through a point and structure, referring to lines and inference questions last. Yeah, and so then just overall, I would say my lessons learned so far is, and this goes for not just test taking strategies, but also studying, is that go for quality over quantity in problems. And by this, I mean the amount of questions you have does not mean anything if you do not have the takeaways from the ones you've done, especially in logical reasoning. I would say in a non-testing situation, when I was doing just practice problems, one of my biggest mistakes was my concern with the amount of questions I was cramming instead of how much I was learning from each question I completed. And in a testing environment, go for accuracy over speed. As my familiarity with the test increased, my speed naturally increased as well. I was never able to complete a single section to begin with for a really long time. And then naturally, I started being able to finish each section with additional time. Also, take review really seriously. Not only should you review your wrong questions, you should review the ones you got right as well, which kind of changed the way that I studied when I started looking at the ones I got correct and understanding the reasoning. Helped me get a deeper understanding of the test. Also, don't be afraid to skip questions in a testing situation. Now I typically skip longer questions that'll take me more time to do, such as parallel reasoning, since they just take time and I'll come back to them later. And I also skip my least favorite question types at first too, such as weekend. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. If everyone has any questions, just let me know.
That was fantastic, Natalie. Well done. So many nuggets there. I feel like it was a great overview of your LSAT journey up to this point. I've got plenty of thoughts here, but I see you've already got a question here from Salman, so I'll let him kick it off.
No, go ahead, Steve. I'll go in after.
No, please, you first.
All right.
First. I just have comments, but
okay,
ask your questions.
Awesome. No, Natalie, that was a wonderful presentation. I'm hoping to one day have your problem to try to keep 160 to 170. So that was awesome. I guess I was just curious for the LR specifically, what was your review process? Or what did that look like? Did you have a specific journal? Is there things that you did in the beginning that you would change now? So I'm just curious how you structure your LR and how you review in a sense.
So I keep a master Google Doc or a document with every question I've ever gotten wrong. But also I would say that what really changed my engagement with the reasoning is the Socratic review method. And that is just writing out in your own words, first rewriting the argument by evidence, filler, conclusions. And then in your own words, write the answer choices right and wrong as well. And another one of Steve's tips about restructuring an argument to do different question types also really helped me as well. And also the flaw in the reasoning question types in particular, changing different answer choices to fit the flaw in question, if that makes sense. I know Steve has a whole class on that too, that I think that class really helped me. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I actually just watched that one earlier today, so that was really cool. So.
Okay, yeah, totally. Soak all that one in. It's really good.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Natalie. And I think for those who are curious about that class, I think it was my second role of statement workshop in the logical reasoning section of the course, where I'm kind of transforming a stimulus from one question type to another, just changing the perspective. But I'm glad to hear that was helpful. One thing that really stood out to me, Natalie, and there are so many things in your presentation, but I think the accuracy over speed element is a really important lesson. I think too often students rush right into the timed work, but in fact, slowing down and focusing on accuracy first for a while, longer than you might want to, can actually help you speed up in the end by giving you that deeper understanding. Is that kind of where you're coming from on that?
Yes, that's like to the T of what I experienced, because at first, when I first started studying, I was just so frustrated that I couldn't finish a section. So then I had gotten to a terrible habit of just speeding through just to say I'd finished at the end. And then my score went down. And that actually happened in a real test taking situation when I took the LSAT a few years ago, when I first started studying a few years ago. But yeah, once I finally slowed down and just took my time, the speed came automatically, and it's kind of insane how that works. And it's real, and trust the process with that.
Awesome. And would you mind just sharing more about your overall timeline up to this point?
Yeah.
Like when you started, when you got your 169, what your steps are after that?
Yeah, of course. Well, so initially I started studying for the LSAT the end of my undergrad in 2018, but that's because I initially wanted to go to law school directly after undergrad. And I had been studying for maybe 4 or 5 months, and I couldn't really break even a 150. And finally I went in after probably 5 months of on and off studying, like self-studying, and scored like 155, and then try to go in again like a few more times, and I got a lower score, like a 154, then a 157. And then at this point, I ended up just taking a break completely from it, and then picking it back up almost, oh my gosh, my timeline's all messed up, and a year and a half later, and just completely started from scratch. And that's when I kind of did more of a course. And then that's when I also found Steve. And I started self-studying over COVID, and I took the test in July, and I had to cancel the score, but my very first score on record since that 155 became a 165. And then I retook the test in January, and then got the 169. If that makes sense. Sorry, I'm like getting my own timeline. I'm confused. I would need to write it all down for it to be concise.
You've been at it for a while. You got your 169 in January.
Yeah.
Then I think you took a break for a bit, right, to focus on school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in a graduate program right now, so I had to take a break, and also had some like health concerns going on, so I had to take a break for 2 months. So I'm kind of picking it back up now. So hoping for the best for June. But I think it all kind of comes naturally if you've been studying it for a while.
So basically, if you put in several months of studying, countless hours, it comes naturally in the end.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I would say, like, if you feel like you're not ready, definitely don't force it. I think that was one thing I did during COVID. That was a mistake on my end. I tried to pick it back up April of 2020, and I was like, I'll be ready for it by, I can't remember if I took the June test. I'm like, I'm gonna be ready for it. I'm just gonna do my best I can. And I ended up having to cancel the score that I did, because I was just like, that was a terrible test on my part. I was not ready at all. So don't gaslight yourself. If you're not ready, you know you're not ready.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.